So, sorry, my mic wasn't working, but today we're doing startups. So again, welcome to startups. We're gonna be starting off with talking about how to develop an idea, and a founder's first goal is to create a product that solves a conflict for customers. And because of this, founders should ask a few questions when coming up with their idea. And a few questions that we have here are: who is the product for? Why is it needed? What problem does it solve? Is this important enough? And is there an actual need for this product? A famous Silicon Valley entrepreneur's quote, Steve Blank, says, "More startups fail from a lack of customers than from a failure of product development." So then again, trying to think about whether your product is going to be important enough for people to start buying and investing in it. Okay, so finding a co-founder. Statistically speaking, the most successful startups have both a founder and a co-founder. And despite this, most failures in startups are caused by the conflicts between the two founders. So because of this, you want to be truthful about your strengths and your weaknesses so that you can find a co-founder that complements your skills. Some tips for hiring that we have here are: don't automatically give everyone a high title. Don't follow major companies' recruiting techniques. Hire those who have faith in your company and also have trial periods for potential employees. Understanding equity and compensation methods. So you want to make sure that you are not leaving anything out of the discussion when it comes to both equity distributions among your co-founders. The unequal split of equity and profit can lead to distrust, and giving an even share to each co-founder helps the company come first. Also, make sure to have equity discussions early so that both the shareholders and the lawyers won't need to be involved. So now, debunking some myths. Um, Renting an office is unnecessary when starting off. Work in a garage, library, coffee shop, or spare bedroom. If a formal work setting is required, one can visit AWS lofts to be in the proximity of technical experts. Keep an eye on monthly expenses such as rent and payroll. Measure the rate at which profit grows, and also measure the cost of acquiring new customers as your company continues to grow. Also, make sure to follow set timetables in order to keep on pace with the goals that you have. Customer discovery. Validate your idea by discussing your product with the people you know, and this could include friends, family, and also potential customers. Customer discovery is evaluating, correcting, and also refining your idea. And this requires a repetitive cycle. So this could be building, learning, testing, or evaluating as well. It's important to note that the more customer feedback you receive, you're going to have a greater advantage. And again, you want to make sure that you are just giving customers what they crave. And as I said before, all of the videos are going to be posted in the description of the live stream once it's ended. So for every video that you see on the slideshow as we're going through, in case you want to watch them and learn more about each part of the slideshow, you can do so after we've ended this session. Okay, now moving on to day two, we're going to be discussing how to find and listen to customers. So, interviews with customers are ultimately the best ways to receive feedback, and this is going to help you figure out what matters to them. And as we said before, that's extremely important because the main idea should be giving a product that customers would like to use and giving what customers crave. Um, every idea starts with finding a new way to please customers, and the goal is to constantly update and to keep up with the customer's needs as time goes on. Also, determine whether your services are going to be used by consumers or other businesses. Sometimes for startups, the customers are actually other businesses. And There are some tips for when you're communicating with your customers throughout these interviews. You want to stay away from vague inquiries, avoid yes or no questions, inquire fundamental questions which are designed to evince insight, um, ask general open questions because they're more beneficial, and also end conversations by asking your customer who else to talk to so you get the most information possible. Now, for customer validation and understanding your market. So, this basically means that you're finding and comprehending your specific customer's market. And enthusiasm that you may receive doesn't necessarily mean that you have a large market, but for determining how large your market is, you want to ask the following questions. Is it large enough to support your business? How many people are going to be buying your product? Is it a new or already existing market? You want to check your CTR rate, which stands for click through rate, if you're on the web or if you have a website. And also, you want to create a sign up page for your product's launch. Consider how much money it will take to reach your markets. Software only products cost much less as compared to hardware only costs. Also, consider implementation roadblocks, such as following certain rules for the specific industry involved. And also, finally, know your competition and learn from their mistakes in order to help set you apart. All right, so for building a prototype, this is something that is created in order to see whether or not a certain product is going to succeed after launch. You want to focus on learning about your product rather than coding and adding to it. And a prototype should be added in order to make the product best suited for customers' needs. Also, don't hurry the process of making a product's prototype and make sure to check frequently to make sure the prototype follows your goal. So, again, prototype being like a blueprint of the product. An MVP. So an MVP stands for minimal viable product, and it's typically the first product a company makes. It's a little different than a prototype, and here's why. It's thought of as the simplest edition of a product that still proves a hypothesis, and it it has as little features as possible that are required to support the key function. And other than what makes it different from a prototype is that an MVP is the first product to be ready for the consumer market, and it tests a hypothesis and is still a bare bones structure of what the idea was meant to be. And what's similar about it to a prototype is that it's not going to be fully ideal, and it also prioritizes functionality over aesthetics. And as you can see in the picture to the right, this it explains a little bit more. So for minimum, it's the most rudimentary bare bones foundation of the solution which is possible. For viable, this means that it is just sufficient enough for early adopters. And for product, this means that it is something changeable, customers can both touch and feel. Now, on how to develop an MVP. So, building an MVP has multiple repetitive cycles, and it goes through processes such as designing, building, deploying, and also measuring. With each addition of new processes, the MVP becomes steadily better, and this allows for both quick and responsive feedback from users. You want to make sure that when you're developing your minimal viable product, you're keeping it simple. And a quote from Reid Hoffman, who's an internet entrepreneur, says that if you aren't embarrassed by the first version of your product, you shipped too late. And you also want to make sure that you add features after your hypothesis has been verified. So once you make sure that your MVP can achieve the desirable tasks, that's when you want to start adding details and think about what the final product is going to be looking like. Another video that's going to be posted in the description.
Uh,
Day three. So day three starts off with sprints, and sprints are processes that are often used when software is being developed. A certain amount of time where predetermined work is completed, and sprints also have a fixed theme and objective. Sprints also have a deliverable function and should last around 1 to 2 weeks. However, the shorter the better. as your goals are not going to change. You want to make sure that you're saving customer feedback for the next sprint. And prioritization means focusing on primary business functions and also focusing on high effect and quick to build work. And a senior software developer at AWS, uh, by the name of Nikki Stone, says you have the capacity to build one great product and make sure it's the right one. The recommendations after sprints are continuous implementation, excuse me, and they're also constant delivery. So these are some potential pitfalls that you might come in contact with. An anti-pattern is a universal response to a conflict which is unproductive, and being prepared for this is going to help prevent whether they undoubtedly show up, because they will at some point. Technical debt gathers when engineers rush through work instead of focusing on both quality and proper implementation. And technical debt doesn't necessarily come from laziness, but instead a strategic decision to swiftly eradicate a conflict. And not generalizing this code can lead to extra coding work and refactoring, which is not good in the long term. And undifferentiated heavy lifting is also a pitfall. Customers want the product and they don't mind that if you are borrowing from existing resources. Remember, you have to keep in mind the customer's vision and what the customer wants. So as long as you get the product to them, you're in good shape. All right, so here are some fundamentals of working with Amazon Web Services. So to start off, one door and two door decisions. So one door decisions um, should be thought through thoroughly, and security decisions are one door decisions and cannot be remade. So when making security decisions, one should consider both AWS's and their responsibilities, and who gets access to certain objects among the workforce, as well as how much access the users receive, should also be taken into account. Startups on AWS receive enterprise level security, and something that's also important is that AWS offers both DDoS and SSL protection. SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer, and standard security technology for creating a protected link between a web server and a browser is provided along with SSL. DDoS stands for the Distributed Denial of Service, and this is a another word for a cyber attack that interferes with the services of the host. And because of this, startups must know the relation of their product with the government, healthcare, and more. Um, y- you must follow any rules and regulations of the field, of course. Points of integration must also be considered because developers are not going to be able to understand a product without the proper documentation. An API is an application programming interface, and this is basically just a set of guidelines which connect with another person's software. And of course, it's important to select the correct database for the type of data that you specifically need to store. Now, an introduction to data architecture with AWS. So, a monolithic architecture is an architecture that combines all the working parts of an application, and this includes data input, output, processing, air handling, and more, all together into one singular program. This allows for rapid development because you don't need to make the processes ahead of time, and also a well-designed monolith can be scaled horizontally and then broken apart at a later date. Architecture applications such as the Amazon Elastic Beanstalk are automate sorry are gonna automate all the processes for you, and it's much simpler to work and handle. Microservices are independent services that each perform their own functions. Microservices work together as a single product. However, if one microservice goes down, the others are unaffected. Microservices are good for scaling large systems, but on the downside, they do take a bit longer to build. This is why you want to optimize your data architecture for speed, and you want to keep in mind that serverless is a type of architecture where servers that code is running on that is okay. I'm sorry. Serverless is a type of architecture where servers that are running do not need to be set up by the user. This also grants more time to focus on the code, and it also automatically scales for the user to avoid um, having customer traffic. Now, talking about assessing your legal needs, a common legal decision that a business makes is whether or not it becomes a legal identity. And a legal entity or identity is when a company gains legal rights and obligations such as tax filings. And there are multiple types of these legal entities, including a limited liability. So, a limited liability is the detachment of personal resources from business resources, and this prevents the business owner's responsibility in both losses and legal liability. It exists to help business owners take risks without the fear of legal action and/or liability. However, it's not perfect and it's not a get out of jail for free card. Now, talking about what unincorporated entities are. So, these are businesses that do not have the limited liability and they're known as unincorporated entities. The two types include both sole proprietorship and general partnerships. Sole proprietorship is owned by businesses and managed by one person. And on the other hand, a general partnership has numerous owners and splits up the responsibilities amongst these owners. There is no legal difference between the owner and the business itself, though. And sole proprietorship is cheaper to start, but it comes with less overhead. Sole proprietorship also risks the owner's personal resources. Another video. And now on to day four, which is starting off with finding a lawyer. So, an option for businesses that are a legal entity is to converse with large startup firms. And these types of firms don't make business owners pay up front, but instead they take a percentage of the company. And if businesses don't want to work with large law firms, they can also work with startup friendly firms. An example of this is Atrium. And for more context, Atrium is a corporate law firm that uses machine learning software in order to automate legal processes. And another option other than these is to find counsel in colleagues or friends. NDAs, IP, and other legal considerations. So, as you probably know, an NDA stands for non disclosure agreement, and it's basically just an agreement that prevents unauthorized disclosure of secrets. If one is assigning development work to an outside organization, then that organization should sign an NDA. A venture capitalist provides startups with funds but receives a return investment, and their organization is most likely not going to sign an NDA. A founders agreement is a necessary legal step when there are multiple founders involved. And this is because of the following: it can outline the responsibilities of each founder involved, there is no template to use as a reference, it can be hard to publicate, there are often numerous negotiations, and it can be very time consuming to finish. What is an intellectual property or IP protection? This is a type of legal concept that provides legal protection for assets. The trademark is a type of IP protection which shields the product of a company from ultimately being copied, and it also patents guard an organization's product. It also gives the patent owner the right to prevent others from using, creating, or selling their patented product, and these patents usually last several years, which leads us into copyright, which guards original artistic work, and it's usually the primary IP protection for most startups. Now, an introduction to fundraising. So, fundraising is a full time job, and because of this, it should be taken as seriously as possible. Venture capitalist firms will invest in companies they believe in hope that they receive a large return. And there are multiple investment types. This includes pre seed, seed, and both Series A and Series B. So, for pre seed and seed, this is an investment that occurs early on before the company shows that the product is actually going to work. And for Series A and Series B, it's funding that is used to help continue to scale the business. The pressure to deliver when a VC invests can be high, And because of this, it is likely that a business, even with the support, is going to be out of business in a few years. Some VCs also work in pre seed or seed funding, and pre seed funding typically occurs in the early stages of product development. Pre seed investments range from $50,000 to $250,000, and seed investments range from $250,000 to $1 million. In 12 to 18 months, a seed VC may want you to fundraise 2 times the amount given if necessary. And when funding the VCs, it's also important to note and to realize that it adds another person to answer to. Now, funding sources outside of VC. So, as you can see by the lists, there are many different ways in order to raise money outside of VCs. And some of these include angel investors, non dilutive funding, crowdfunding, and accelerator programs. For angel investors, these are wealthy people who are looking to passively fund startups with capital in exchange for equity and convertible debt. They don't expect or want a 50 times return on the investment, but they instead have a different motivation. And they usually invest about 25 to $250,000. For some of these angel investors, a 3 to 5 times return would be wonderful. Not now for non-dilutive funding. So this is money that is incorporated in order to support the product without having to give up any equity. And examples include bank loans or university or federal grants. For crowdfunding, this includes Kickstarter and GoFundMe, and this may assist in providing early adopters, but it may be more difficult than seed rounds. So this is basically just gathering money from the public for your cause. And finally, for accelerator programs, these are group-based programs where entrepreneurs produce their ideas into reality. They select a tiny percentage of companies and they help make those companies grow. They usually invest approximately $20 to $150,000 while asking for a 5 to 7% equity return investment. They offer mentoring, training, and feedback, and they usually last around 3 months. For crafting a fundraising narrative, this basically shows why one is spending money in the first place, and it's not the same as a pitch deck because it's much less thorough. Although this is true, though, the primary questions still have to be answered, and these questions include what are you creating? What's the most captivating factor of the business? How much progress has actually been made? What are you striving to achieve? And the narrative should also be short and sweet. So you should have the ability to informally discuss it with potential investors, and this should be quick that it can so that it can be explained in 20 seconds or less. The first 10 seconds should be who you are, what you're doing, and why it's important. And the last 10 seconds should be the progress, the milestones, and the long term vision. You also want to find the one persuasive reason as to why your company should receive the investment, and a good narrative should have a strong financial plan to support its claim. Also, take note that financial models are essentially inferences. Another video, and now for day 5. So, starting off with day 5, what makes a good pitch deck? So, your pitch deck is basically your business card, and it's given to those who are in the best position to help you, such as investors and mentors. One of the first things customers are going to see, and it's going to leave a huge impression about your company. The key areas of a pitch deck are the following: so, problem and solutions, the business model, and the market. For creating a deck, you want to start with whatever is the most persuasive. You want to keep it incisive, and it's also better to be concise than to make investors disinterested. It's typically a length of 10 to 13 slides long, and you want to make sure that you answer the questions behind the investments. And these questions are: why is this a good opportunity? Why do you have the proper team to do it? And why is this specific round of funding necessary? This is how to prospect your initial fundraising funnel. You want to generate contention amongst your investors, and you want to keep in mind that the 3 to 1 rule is important in order to generate the competition between the investors. You want to be in the final stages of negotiation with the 3 investors at the same time, and it's estimated to need about 10 meetings between investors to create a 3 to 1 situation. Some investor companies invest in numerous companies, while others only invest in a limited amount. And tools like both Crunchbase and LinkedIn can help find investors if you can't find 20 or more to start with. Other entrepreneurs have VC companies that work with them, which makes it way more easy to get advice on how to approach. And also focus on people in the VC business and don't always just focus on firms. Now, initiating fundraising mode. You want to spend approximately 10% of your time creating relationships with potential investors and founders later on within the process. These relationships can make it easy and quick to find your high level investments. And you want to be able to negotiate and finalize with an investor before moving on and searching for a new group. Also, make sure that you understand the different types of people working at a VC firm. Uh, these types include partners, venture partners, principals, and associates. For partners, these are generally the people who are making the most decisions. Venture partners are part time workers who look to source deals and make a couple of investments. Principals are new to the business and are just starting to make deals. And associates are people who can't make investments, but they do help business owners navigate through the investment process. Also, attempt to have a mutual acquaintance that introduces you to the actual investor. Make sure that you understand the stages of growth. So there are multiple stages of company growth with all the different goals that you may have. The two main stages over here are included. So for stage one, you want to deliver a product and make sure that your team can build something consumers are actually going to buy. You want to make sure that the product is ready to be sold on the market. And after the first sale, you want to ask yourself if you can turn your customers into a full customer base. The objective here is to obtain a large amount of sales. Stage two is where you want to expand, and this is where survival is basically guaranteed, and investors are guiding businesses to further success. The startup is now a more mature business, and it's no longer considered a beginner, but you also want to do your homework before in order to have a chance of reaching stage two so that you can guarantee your survival of the company. How to build a product roadmap. So this is a guide through the whole business process from making a product to making your first sale. You want to make sure that you're creating milestones throughout the map in order to help shareholders know where the key important events are in a basic timeline. A/B testing is helpful here because it sets apart the two options when coming across how a certain variable must function. And also, the A/B test brings about valuable results about which opinion is going to perform the best based on a particular parameter or goal. It also makes sure that that decisions are less biased. An important decision when making a roadmap is deciding when to pivot. And if your product development team starts heading in the wrong direction, a pivot to your roadmap can help get things back on track. If something isn't working, don't force it and don't cause more trouble. An example of this is how Instagram pivoted their idea from being a check-in product to a place to post personal pictures to share with the world. They then stripped off any non-essential features in order to both save money and better fit the app. Product and channel fit. So the question you want to ask here is how effective is the product at having customers find it publicly, or how accessible is the product? Common startup growing pains. Startups can cause long hours, and they can be extremely demanding. There are ways to conduct your business with greater results for your employees and your own products as well, though. Create and enforce strict limits on work hours, and make sure that you're not throwing all of your energy into a startup because it's going to hurt your product and its effectiveness. Make sure to generate nourishment codes for all employees or finish lines, and pay a great amount of attention to the hiring process. Employ people that fit your company culture, and make sure that you interview correctly and consider the candidate on how they're going to contribute to the com- community and how they're not just going to be a non-negative. A good interview question would be to ask how the candidate worked through a real life problem, and this way you can see their experience and how they'll be able to help your specific company. And at a startup with less than 100 employees, the CEO really should be making the hiring decisions because the first few employees really serve as the base for the entire company. Culture. So, culture is the persona of your company, and it's a mixture of the following things. work environment, company mission, values, ethics, expectations, and goals. Think about having third party voices and make sure you give a voice into the culture of your company because this is going to be a possible benefit. Create a culture within your startup that can accommodate not just yours, but the whole community's strengths and weaknesses. And make sure that you realize that culture is not equal to perks. Culture is more difficult to generate than perks, and you want to find different ways to talk to employees en masse. Information is received differently by different people, mentally speaking, and multiple pass-throughs are going to be have to gonna multiple pass-throughs are going to be used in order to spread necessary information. A founder should personally interview at least 50 people for their first hires. They should develop effective interview questions, and they should make sure that they understand defining culture is not the end, and it's a process that keeps growing as time goes on. And this is the bibliography where we find our sources. Uh, Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next session.